Well, hello, avid readers. I'm very excited to have Elizabeth Camden with us today. I have loved her books before and have just started reading this most recent one that we're going to be talking about, and I'm already loving it. In fact, I was almost late to our interview because I was reading and I'm like, oh, wait, I need to go talk to the author. So, first of all, Elizabeth, welcome. And why don't you just start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, well, thank you for that warm welcome, and thank you for taking a peek at my book. That's always great to
Yes.
hear. So I'm now a full-time writer. I started my career as a librarian. I was a research librarian at college campuses for about 25 years.
Mm.
My first novel was published 15 years ago, and it took until about 2 or 3 years ago until I had enough traction as a writer to be able to quit the day job.
Yeah.
And, I remember thinking when I turned in my resignation papers, I thought, I don't know what I'm going to be if I can't think of myself as a librarian anymore. And I remember getting so choked up about leaving that career and
Mm.
embarking on this new one, even though it wasn't new because I'd been writing for, I think I'd written 10 or 11 books by then. But I'm officially no longer a librarian. I'm a full time writer now. And I'm just really thrilled that there's people out there who are happy to read my books.
Yes. Okay. What was the title of your first book?
Oh, my
Um,
first book was called The Lady of Bolton Hill.
okay. I just remember. Okay, what was the one? Oh, anyway, I just remember reading one of your books. I can't remember which one now because they're kind of going together in my mind. But I'm like,
Uh,
I love all the bits of research and this and that, and so I did not know you were a research librarian. So this makes so
yeah.
much sense to me. Those
Okay.
little details, which I just love. And that's why I've enjoyed your book so much. I'm like, oh, research librarian. This makes so much sense. So let's talk about this because I want to talk about the research that went into this book.
Sure.
So the new book is When Stars Light the Sky.
Uh
So
huh.
this is pre World War One. Why
Right.
don't you tell us just yes, the German embassy, all these
Sure.
very very cool things. But why don't you
Yeah.
tell us, like, it's just in general what the story is about?
Sure. Well, it is set during the World War I years. If you remember from American history, the
Hmm.
war broke out in 1914, but for the first 2 years, America was on the sidelines.
Hmm.
And so we had our embassy in Germany where there were all these diplomats who were really trying to negotiate peace and trying to keep America out of the war. That was the big thing. Um, and I thought, well, that would be a fascinating setting
Yes.
for a novel inside the embassy. And the way I got this idea, for those of you who are watching this, um, gosh, when I was in college, I used to read. I'm a nut for biographies and memoirs, and I found this book that had been pulled out of the library for a used book sale. And the title of the book is called My 4 Years in Germany by James
Oh
Gerard.
wow.
And this book is the memoir written by the American ambassador to Germany. And this was published in 1919, the year after the war ended. And it's his memoirs. And it was absolutely fascinating. It is not what you would expect. You would expect it would all be about, meeting with the president and diplomatic cables and stuff. No, 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 no. This book is about what parties he attended, what yachting events, what sporting, what he wore to the opera, what his wife wore to the opera. The Kaiser had 6 sons, and they were all handsome young men at the time the war broke out. And so the sons make an appearance in my book, and uh, James Gerard was a fascinating individual. He was a political appointee, not somebody who really knew what he was
Mhm.
doing. He was friends with Woodrow Wilson, and he donated a ton of money to Wilson's presidential campaign, and that was how he got the appointment to be ambassador to Germany. It was a payback. Nobody knew this war was going to happen, so he was really completely unprepared when the war did happen. And so he's a major secondary character in the book. The uh, the main character is his secretary,
Yeah.
and it's a love story, of course. And then she falls in love with one of the other diplomats who is working in the embassy, and he's one of the career diplomats who knows what's going on. And it's an opposites attract love story because I love an old school hero, very high in the instep, very straight laced, whereas she's bubbly and fun.
Mm.
So And then the setting, the stakes could not be more high, trying to keep America out of the war during this very strange kind of twilight years.
Mhm.
The book is called When Stars Light the Sky, and that was picked by my publisher. Well, sometimes a little inside baseball news. Sometimes your publisher has more control over
Yeah.
the packaging and titling
Mhm.
of a book. In fact, they always have more control. I
Yeah,
wanted
yeah.
my working title for this book was Twilight in Berlin,
Mm.
and that didn't. They were worried that that wouldn't be a big seller. They thought it sounded like a downer, and it's
Right.
not a downer. It's about this weird twilight era.
Mhm.
It's the end of the Gilded Age, the beginning of the modern era. And it's in Berlin. Almost the entire book takes place in Berlin. But Berlin was never affected by the war. Not World War One.
Right,
The
right.
war was off on the Western Front. This was 100 miles away from Berlin, so Berlin was untouched, and the balls and the operas continued. And so the title, When Stars Light the Sky, is trying to hint at that twilight era when everything is about to change and you don't know if it's going to get darker or if the sun is going to rise again.
Mhm.
But that's the story behind the title.
And I love that it is, American, well, American, so she's from an immigrant. Her family immigrated from Germany,
Mhm.
or from Bavaria at the time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And then going back, and so the memory, she loves New York, so it's not something she had a heart, she's not an ambitious person, had a heart to go back
Right.
to Germany. She's
Right.
doing it because of a favor or a gift, I guess, that was given to her family, and I love that point of view, like, she's this is not something that she's politically wanting to be in these circles. It reminded me of, there's a book I read, one of my favorites is The Spy Wore Red, and this was pre World War II, but it involved um, Edward, who left to be king of England right before World War II, and
Is
he
this a
married,
novel? Was
it's
this
a
a
novel.
novel or a
It's a
memoir? Oh,
novel.
okay. Okay.
Yes. Well, it's a novelized memoir.
Okay, because I
But
remember reading about this woman,
yes.
who it was about. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it just reminds is okay, so this, I'm just saying it's like similar, but that we think it's going to be everyone, all they think about is the war all the time. We
Mhm.
don't we think no, they're having parties, they're doing this, they're having these
Absolutely.
dinners, and you're like, what's going on? Like, we know how the average person was impacted by the war. And so this is so fascinating to me that it's so true when you have these circles, it's very different from the daily ordinary people, and and like you said, they didn't know war was going to come. When it
Mhm.
came, it came because the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria ended up
Mhm.
launching the war. And in fact, I went, when I was in Czech Republic, which my daughter's a missionary
Yeah.
there, we went
Mhm.
to Terezin. It later became a concentration camp, but that's where the young man that assassinated him was held. We walked into the cell,
Wow.
and so I
Wow.
love so many
Wow.
things about, you know, we often in America don't learn about this period of history.
Mhm.
We kind of
Mhm.
skim over everything about World War One and kind of go straight to World
Yeah.
War Two
Yeah.
because it's
Yeah.
very dramatic. But as I'm reading, like, click, click, like, all these things are like clicking off in my
Right.
head. And then
Uh-huh.
I love even the details, like they're on the ship and like the things on the menu. And I'm sitting here reading like, I bet she knew that these things were really on the menu
Oh,
there,
yeah. Those
because
me
when things are mentioned like that very specifically,
Uh-huh.
someone has done their research. When they're just like, they just had a lovely dinner of steak and potato soup, or I don't know, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
yeah.
you're like, they didn't make it. But when they specifically name the four types of beef and the menus in French, and then they had
Yeah.
the lobster, I'm like, lobster bisque. I'm like, she knows what they had on this. So,
Yeah.
I mean, as a research librarian, is it hard when you have so many details and you discover these things? I saw all the sticky notes in that book, to
Mhm.
then like, okay, this is enough. I need to continue on with
Right.
the story. Or is
Right.
it easy for you just to kind of like
Oh,
have it
I try.
unfold?
Well, there's a famous mantra that, an author should skip the boring parts. You don't,
Mm,
I don't want to bore the reader with my research.
yeah.
I want them to feel like just a little detail here and there. I
Mhm.
am not going to describe the entire menu. I'm just going to say that
Mhm.
the lobster bisque had a hint of sherry.
Yeah.
and then move on. Just
Yes.
I think that it's more, it actually communicates more because a reader is not going to read a whole huge long block describing the table settings and the music that's being played. One little detail and then move ahead.
Yes.
That's how I do research, yeah.
And I talked to that because, teaching creative writing, I teach it to high schoolers at our
Mhm.
homeschool co-op, and, we talk about the difference between, 100 years ago, 150 years ago, these novels had very long descriptions, but
Right.
they also did that was their evening entertainment. They didn't have
Sure.
television, they didn't
Right.
have radio, so
Right.
all these descriptions of the rich tapestries, this was completely new to the average
Right.
reader to
Right.
go into the ballroom or to describe what was on the menu, and so it
Mhm.
is for, I guess, the modern reader, those little
Yeah.
touches, it brings so much to life where I
Right.
feel like I'm there and part of it and care about what's happening, but again, I'm sure you could put 20 times more details onto everything that you describe.
Yeah, I do try to keep it brief, yeah. But you were
So good.
mentioning about, Inga and, my heroine of the book, Inga.
Yes.
She's German, and she immigrated to America when she's 8 or 10 years old,
Mhm.
and, so that was why she was picked to be the ambassador's secretary, is because she's fluent in
Mhm.
German, but she is a very loyal American. And I got a lot of those ideas from my own family because my grandfather was, well, he was born in the United States, but his father, they were all German immigrants.
Mhm.
And so, and they all fought in the war
Mhm.
for the United States.
Yeah.
And I remember asking my grandfather, I said, because I was a freshman in high school when he passed away, but I got to actually talk to World War I veterans because he and his
Wow.
brother served in the war. And he said he felt no dual divided loyalty whatsoever.
Mhm.
And so I thought that that was interesting because I just would have thought, oh, they're Germany. It must hurt to go to war. Not according to my grandfather.
Yeah.
Um, and so that was another interesting dilemma that I thought I could just very on the edges weave through the whole divided loyalty thing. And I think, America is a nation of immigrants, and many of us can point to, we know who our ancestors were who came over, whether it was from Germany or Italy or England or Africa or
Mhm.
nowadays Vietnam and Asia. And we're a global world, and sometimes we have conflict with countries over there. And that whole divided loyalty thing is with a lot of us.
Mm.
So that was just another aspect I was able to weave into the book.
Yeah, and I love that you have, again, it's loyalty for these people that cared for her family in the time of
Hmm.
need. Um, but then, if you had to be loyal and taken care of by a family, just lavished with all the clothes and all the things,
Yeah.
it was fun imagining what that would have been like.
Yeah. Now, of course, she is a fictional character, but James
Yes.
Gerard, the ambassador, is not. And in real life, he was one of the richest men in America. He married,
Mm.
his wife was the daughter of a Montana guy who owned silver mines. I'm
Oh,
drawing a blank on,
wow.
but she was a massive heiress. Now it was a love match. They did love each other very much, and they had no children in
Mm,
real life.
mhm.
And so I created this fictional, this my character is almost like a goddaughter to them, which is why she gets to enjoy things like nice clothes,
Yeah.
and she feels very indebted to them, which is why she agrees to go to Germany as as his secretary. She doesn't
Mhm.
particularly want to, but she does. And
Yeah.
you like people who pay their debts, so
Yeah.
that's what she's doing when she goes to Germany.
Yeah, and let's talk about the love interest Benedict because her godparents, we'll say godparents, the
Sure.
Gerards, don't care for him at all.
Right.
He's
Right. Right.
completely opposite.
Right.
And
Right.
Benedict's point of view, the Gerards, I mean, it was his money that got him there. He doesn't know politics. He's offending everyone, and he's trying to
Hmm.
clean up the mess.
Right.
And of course, that's what makes great love stories is when you have these conflicting
Right.
interests. So
Right.
talk a little. I know it's so hard to balance between how much you give of the story and how much you don't, but let's just talk about that. Their kind of these two worlds colliding in a
Right,
different world, like a
right.
different place
Sure.
in the midst of a mounting war. So, I mean, if you ever want to figure out how to make a novel one you can't put down, um, opposites attracts, conflicting interests with someone one person loves, one person doesn't love. I won't say
Right.
despise, but doesn't love in a different country. I mean, this is like a fish out of water. Opposites attract. Um, and the
Yeah.
mounting war, everything is all thrown in. Which again, I'm sitting here reading like, oh wait, I need to go do an interview now because it's the type of books that there's no moment where you're like, oh, let me just flip ahead because nothing's happening here. So let's
Yeah.
just talk in general about this love match, this romance, and some of the
Sure.
conflicts around them.
Right. Well, in real life, James Gerard, his staff did not care for him, the diplomatic
Mhm.
staff. Just like today, a lot of ambassadors are political appointments. They're friends with the president, or the president owes them a favor. And in
Yeah.
real life, that's how James Gerard got to be the ambassador. But the
Mm.
diplomatic staff that carries out a lot of the actual day-to-day work of the embassy, they can stay there for decades. After the administration is long over, they will be there carrying out the actual work. So that's who the hero is, Benedict. He is chief of the diplomatic corps, and he's there to keep the ambassador in line and show him the ropes. The ambassador knows that he is disliked and distrusted. And so on the ship over to Germany, Inga, my heroine, is prepared to dislike Benedict because the Gerards dislike him
Yeah.
and distrust him. And so you've got this very straight laced hero who knows what he's doing. He's extremely competent. And then you have Inga, and she is as friendly and as bubbly as they come.
Mm.
And so they clash. It's an opposites attract, but they are going to come to need each other because Inga, as bubbly and cheerful as she is a very competent secretary, and they need each other. He needs to be lightened up. He needs her humor. What Benedict needs, what he lacks, is joy in his life.
Yeah.
He's so serious. He is desperate to stop this war, and Inga never gets down. I think we all know people like that in life, people who are always smiling and cheerful and can manage to rise to the surface no matter how hard they've been smacked down.
Mhm.
That is Inga. And he will eventually start to see this in her. And then he starts to need that. And then he starts to depend on her. And so you've got two characters who it's a slow burn romance, but it is one of the strongest and most powerful romances I've ever written.
Yeah.
As
Oh,
these
I'm
two.
cannot wait.
Okay, well, good. I truly enjoyed writing their love story together. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, I love it. Okay, so this is also part of a series.
Uh huh.
Explain that because at first I'm like, look, when I'm looking at the series, I'm like, how is this going to work into? But
Sure.
okay, explain.
Okay, the series is very loosely linked. So you do
Okay.
not need to read the first book or the third book to totally enjoy this romance. The only link is that all the heroines live in the same apartment building in New York City,
Uh huh.
and they
Which
were
was
all friends.
fascinating. The Martha of
Okay.
Washington.
Yeah, the Martha
Yeah.
Washington Hotel was a real hotel. It was for professional women at the turn of the century. This was a time when it was hard for women to find a respectable place to live if you weren't
Mhm.
married. So you had to be single and you had to be able to afford the rent. So the Martha Washington, which is on 37th Street in Manhattan, it was filled with stenographers, nurses, teachers,
Wow.
lawyers, all female, and so each woman is the head of her own love story, but that's the only link. And so you may not even realize you're reading a sequel or the second book in a series,
Right.
but that is the only link. And so hopefully people, if they don't want to go through the first book, that's perfectly fine if you want to pick it up here. It has a good, satisfying ending, and this book is set primarily 1914 to 1917 when the war when
Yeah.
America enters the war. That's when this book ends. And then the third and final book is during the war. It's the heroine will be a pacifist and the hero is going to be a fighter pilot. So I think you
What?
can see where the conflict in that one's going to be. But
Oh,
that one will take it through to the end of the war, and then we're going to end with America, finally coming back home.
yeah, so amazing. All right, so I'm trying to figure out what question to ask next. Okay, let's talk about book three before we jump back in this one because I'm fascinated by this pacifist and the fighter pilot thing. Is
Right.
that book written? Where is that? When is it going to be
I'm
released?
I'm turning that one into my publisher next month, and so
Okay,
I have a January release schedule.
okay,
So it will be out 1 year from the second book, and that's
yeah,
why I deliberately do not link my books. I don't want people
yeah.
to feel like there's a cliffhanger, they got to read the next
Mhm.
book. No, I don't do that. So this book has it stands completely on its own. All three books in the
Yeah,
trilogy stand on their own and have a satisfying ending.
good. Okay, that's what I was wondering. I'm like, okay, first of all, I want that now, but I bet I'm gonna have to wait. And yes, I'm gonna have to. I'm gonna have to wait. It's
Yeah.
okay. We can wait a year. We'll keep our thumbs twiddling for the next year as we wait for that
Yeah.
one. Oh, okay,
Yeah.
but I love it. Okay, so and tell us a little. Oh, do you have first of all, do you have a title that you could share for book three?
I don't. I don't
Okay,
know I have no idea what that one's gonna be called.
okay. So book one. Tell us about book
Book
one.
1 was called, While the City Sleeps,
Okay.
and it is set, in 1913, the year before the war.
Mm-hmm.
And it was set, again, with a real life character. My heroine is a dentist in that one, and
Okay.
believe it or not, she works in an overnight clinic. There was a real dentist, named Painless Parker, and he believed in providing affordable dental care for everybody. And so he knew working people could not go to the dentist during the day. He had clinics that were open until 10 o'clock at night. And
Wow.
he had clinics. It was very interesting. He was so progressive for his time. He believed that um, women wanted to go to a woman dentist. A
Mm-hmm.
German person who didn't speak English wanted to go to a German dentist who could speak their language. A black dentist. He employed all variety of dentists
Wow.
for different clientele. And so my heroine is a woman who works the overnight shift, and she falls in love with a cop who works the evening beat. And
So cool.
yeah,
I've
so
missed that one. I'm gonna have to go back and find that one because it's
okay,
once I started reading this, I'm like, now I remember why I like her books, and that's a good thing. Like we can rediscover favorite authors over and over again.
yeah,
I love that. It's so fun, and I love that they you don't have to read one without the like the other one. So definitely go get this one now. It's just newly releasing,
yeah,
and so you can enjoy it, but then you can go back and find the other ones,
sure.
which is great. Okay, so I also love as we write Christian fiction, and we are weaving the characters and weaving the plots. There's also the characters. I mean, the author's point of view is going to come through, and faith is going
Hmm.
to come through. Let's
Hmm.
talk about that element of this
Hmm.
story.
Hmm. Well, the faith in this one, because it's a time of war, and all of the characters have had great loss.
Hmm.
Um, just sort of dealing with how do you keep your faith going and strong
Hmm.
when times are tough.
Yeah.
My one of my favorite biblical passages is from Ecclesiastes. I'm sure everybody knows it. There's a time for everything, a time to mourn, a time to dance, a time to grieve, time to sow, a time to reap. You know that one.
Yes.
Um, and sometimes we're going through a time of war. Sometimes we're going through periods of
Hmm.
grief.
Hmm.
Um, this too shall pass.
Hmm.
And sometimes you feel like you're the only one going through this time of hunger or despair. Um, it's a season of life, and this
Hmm.
too shall pass. That whole passage, it's a little bit bleak. It's not a joyful passage.
Hmm.
It's almost an accepting
Yeah.
passage. We're going to work through this, and this is normal, but God's still with us. These are seasons that we are all going to walk through. And so I know that I tell myself this. I
Hmm.
mean, I've gone through a couple difficult seasons. My parents have died in the last 3 years. I've lost both my parents.
I'm so
My
sorry.
dad to a very lingering Alzheimer's, and then my mom, who took care of him. She was just exhausted, and she died shortly after that.
Wow.
And it was just a really rough time for me. I was their caretaker,
Mm,
and it was a rough, rough time, but it's a normal part of life. I
yeah.
mean, it's actually a blessing if you think about it.
Yeah.
It is a blessing to have your parents into their old age,
Mhm.
as hard as it is to witness. It's a blessing because not everybody gets that.
Yeah.
Um, so that's one of my favorite biblical passages, and I can lean on it in my own life, and I weave it into a lot of my books.
Yeah. And I think that's so important. That's why we come to Christian fiction because there's so many good selling, best selling
Mhm.
books out there that might be well written. And then you get to the end of them, you're like, blah.
Yeah,
But Christian
yeah.
fiction, we have that hope, we have that encouragement. And I needed personally that today. I'm caring for my grandmother who's
Yeah.
95. She lives in our
Uh-huh.
home.
Wow,
And
wow.
it's daily and it's hard and
It
I
is.
lost my dad in July. So it's like,
Sorry.
okay,
Yeah,
all of us have these seasons
yeah,
that we
yeah.
go through.
And somebody told me at the time when I was just exhausted. I was just exhausted. And my cousin said, "This is the hardest thing you're ever going to go through, but it's one of the best things,
Mhm.
and you'll never regret a minute of it."
Yeah.
And I remember I nodded and said, "Yeah, sure." And I didn't really believe it. But now here I am more than a year out, and
Yeah.
it's like she was right. I
Mhm.
don't I don't regret a minute of it. I wish I had had more.
Mhm.
So it's just a season of life.
Yeah, and as we are changed and we realize that's what's truly important, and we realize that
Mhm.
God can be with us even in the hard things,
Yeah,
those things make it into our books.
yeah.
Some I remember the first time I went to a online like Christian writers group, and everyone was sharing their prayer requests. I'm like, I don't know if I want to be a Christian writer. Everyone's going through really, really hard things. Like, is this what you sign up for when you become a Christian writer? That you're just gonna sign up for hard, but everyone goes through hard stuff. It's not just Christian writers, but the Christian writers, the great thing is that we can use every part of it and
Right,
weave it in our stories. And
right.
people say, oh, your characters seem like they're real life people. Well, because the things they're learning and the things that they're discovering and the hard, painful moments are part of our stories. We just get to, it's
Mhm.
almost like therapy for us. We just get to put our characters through it and bring hope where there's very hard times. So
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I love that. All right. So as we are, okay, I'm going to tell the title again. When Stars Light the Sky. Do you have a copy of it that you can hold up for us there? I think I
I
left mine
don't. I'm
downstairs. Okay.
sorry. I don't have my book yet.
I have it on my,
Oh,
for
look
those who are
at you.
looking, there we
I should
go. It's on my
Okay, you're
phone.
yeah, thank you. Thank you for having that.
Yes, my printed copies downstairs in my room.
Okay.
My pre copy that I got in the mail.
Uh-huh.
But it's a beautiful cover too,
Thank
and
you.
also Berlin is a fascinating place
Yeah,
to set a novel to, and
yeah,
see glimpses of that on the cover. But
yeah.
as we're wrapping this up, what is one thing that you hope that readers will take away as they go through this book?
Oh, well, I hope they think it's the best love story they ever read.
Oh, there we
I should probably say
go.
something spiritual and more meaningful, but I love a good love story.
Oh, so
That's
good.
I hope that they read that and just wanna go back to page 1 and read about Inga and Benedict all over again.
I love that. Okay, and now my other question, I have one more question.
Uh-huh.
What is a Christian novel or novels that you've enjoyed recently, or
Oh my
an
gosh.
all-time favorite,
Sure.
whatever you wanna share?
Can I give you a favorite author or
Yes,
2?
absolutely. Yes.
Um, I have recently discovered Rosanna White,
Oh, yeah.
Rosanna M. White, and she's written
She's
a
so good.
ton of books, and it's like, how did I not read her before?
Yeah.
And she's got a lot of diversity in her historical settings and things.
Mhm.
So I'm going through Rosanna's old back file, and what a treat when you find somebody who's got a big, long back file.
Yes, yes.
Now she does historical, and then I'm going to just squeeze in one of everybody's favorites for contemporary because I read everything, and it's Becky Wade. I just
Oh,
love
yeah.
Becky Wade novels for contemporaries. So,
And I love that. I mean, it's so true when I sit down and like, I am fascinated. This is so completely opposite of what I write,
uh
and
huh,
yet it's so good. Like it's so fun to see talk about diversity, the diversity of writers that just get a
sure.
really good story across. And I love both of those authors too.
Great.
Yes.
Good.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Where can people go to find more information about this book and your other books?
Okay, well, my books are for sale everywhere. So elizabethcamden.com is my website. I'm most active on Facebook, where I share
Okay.
trivia almost every day, like just historical tidbits and little insights to my writing. And that's just, author Elizabeth Camden on Facebook.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth, for being here today.
Well, thank you for having me. This was a real treat. It was wonderful meeting you.
Great meeting you too.